Number 7. Merrick. In 2016, a Polish man was hitchhiking through Ireland on his way to purchase a car he'd found on the internet. Identified as Merrick, the man was eventually given a lift by a family of 4. He sat between the 2 young children and the doors were locked about 15 minutes into the car ride. Merrick believes that the woman then texted someone else because the car turned into a deserted road where another vehicle appeared. A man and a woman armed with knives got out of the second car. Even though Merrick had already given them his wallet, the driver and the occupants of the second car started stabbing him in the legs. The attack unfolded while the children were still next to him. Merrick remembered that the driver looked happy as he was stabbing him. The man sustained puncture wounds from his knees to his ankles and was abandoned on the side of the road. He called paramedics, who later told Merrick that if he'd waited 5 more minutes, he would have bled out. The victim still had trouble walking in the incident's aftermath, but there was no permanent damage. Number 6. Pendergast Family. In November of 1958, Thomas Pendergast picked up a 17-year-old homeless hitchhiker named Carl Alfred Eder. Pendergast allowed the teen to live with him and his family until he got back on his feet. On December the 12th of that year, after Pendergast went to work, Eder murdered his entire family. He shot Pendergast's wife and killed his 4 children with a hunting knife. His murderous rage had reportedly been triggered by one of the children, whom he felt was making too much noise. Upon Pendergast's return, Eder pointed a gun at him and asked for a ride. A struggle ensued in the car and the older man was able to wrestle the weapon away from Eder, who then fled the scene. It was only after Pendergast had gone back home that he found his family had been brutally murdered. Eder was arrested a few days later and subsequently sentenced to 2 life terms. In 1974, while working outside a prison in California, Eder escaped. He left behind a note which read, "I've done enough time and I'm leaving." The man was never apprehended, while later reports claimed he'd gotten involved with biker gangs and white supremacist groups. Number 5. Kaylee Massey. In October of 2015, an Oklahoma teenager was fatally shot by a hitchhiker, who was subsequently also found dead. 18-year-old Kaylee Massey and an acquaintance were heading to Lake Canton when they picked up Christopher Blake Scruggs. The man had a lengthy criminal record that included assault and animal cruelty. At some point during the drive, Scruggs reportedly pulled out a gun and shot Massey, who was on the passenger's side. The 23-year-old then fled the scene, while the driver rushed the teenager to a hospital, where she was pronounced dead. There are still a number of unanswered questions in the shooting. Some reports suggest there were other people in the car and that they knew Scruggs. There was no sign of the wanted man, still considered the main suspect in the months that followed. The story would become further entangled when the farmer spraying his field in Blaines County found a human skull. The authorities were called in and more skeletal remains were unearthed. All were confirmed as belonging to Scruggs. Number 4. Mark Matson. In July of 1978, teenager Mark Matson and his girlfriend Paula Lee hitched a ride with a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Eric. He claimed that he also had some work the couple could help him with at his house in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Once they arrived in his home, the man held them at gunpoint. In a soundproof torture chamber, he forced Matson and Lee to perform sexual acts on each other while he took photographs. Hours into their ordeal, Matson tried to grab the captor's gun but was fatally shot in the process. 15-year-old Lee was held for over 24 hours in the torture room. She was repeatedly abused and tortured. Lee was forced to watch as the killer dismembered her boyfriend. The teenager was then released by her captor and she went straight to the police. Lee's story was met with disbelief by the authorities after her mother, when contacted for details, referred to her as a pathological liar. A separate incident, however, would confirm the horrors she'd endured. 2 days after Albert Brust hadn't moved from a chair on his lawn, one of his neighbors called the police. Officers found the man had killed himself by mixing cyanide into his chocolate milk. A search of his home revealed Mark Matson's remains, encased in a bleeding slab of concrete in his shower stall. Number 3. Philip Fraser. In June of 1988, Philip Fraser was driving to the US from his native Canada. He stopped at a cafe in a rural community where he picked up a hitchhiker. This was the last time that Fraser was ever seen alive. A few hours later, a man driving his car flagged down a passing vehicle. He complained of car trouble, and the couple, Eddie and Pauline Olsen, towed him back to their home. They even let the man spend the night in their basement. The following morning, he told them that he was Philip Fraser and that he was going to the US to study medicine. He offered to sell the Olsens his car so that he could get a plane ticket. The couple remembered the man was behaving secretively and noticed he was carrying 2 wallets. When told by the Olsens that the car purchase would take some time, the impersonator promptly repaired the vehicle and left, never to be seen again. Roughly 12 hours later, Fraser's car was found several hundred miles from the Olsens' home. The vehicle had been burned down. Then on July the 27th, Fraser's body was discovered in a remote gravel pit, and it was concluded that he'd been fatally shot. The hitchhiker was never identified, and he remains the main suspect in Fraser's death. Today's topic was requested by Lord Matthew. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Colleen Stan. In 1977, Colleen Stan was hitchhiking from Eugene, Oregon, to Northern California for a birthday party. She was picked up by Cameron Hooker. The man's wife, Janice, and their child were also in the car. Once they were in an isolated area, Hooker pressed a knife to Stan's throat. This marked the beginning of a 7-year nightmare for the young woman. Stan was forced to become Hooker's sexual slave and was held in the couple's home in Red Bluff, California. She was constantly abused and kept, sometimes for 23 hours a day, in a coffin-like wooden box under the couple's bed. Stan had to call Hooker master and wasn't allowed to make any noise as she spent most of her days in darkness with little air to breathe. She was only taken out to be fed and sexually tortured. Hooker manipulated Stan into complying with his deranged fantasies by telling her he worked for the company, a powerful organization that could have harmed her family. Stan was being groomed by her captor to become his second wife, which marked a turning point for Janice. The woman had also been severely abused throughout her years of marriage. She eventually told Stan that Hooker didn't work for the company and thus had no power over her. Stan fled, and Janice would later report her husband to the police. Janice also testified against him in court in exchange for full immunity, and Hooker was given a sentence totaling 104 years.
Official They Will Kill You merchandise is now available at theywillkillyou.com. Some of it is to die for.
Number 1. Kai the Hitchhiker. A hitchhiker, only identifying himself as Kai, became a viral sensation in 2013 for what has been described as a heroic intervention. That year in Fresno, California, Kai had been picked up by Jet Simmons McBride, a man believed to have been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. In the car, McBride told Kai that when he was younger, he raped a 14-year-old during a business trip to the Virgin Islands. He then claimed to be Jesus Christ and crashed his car into a pedestrian, pinning him against a truck. As Kai and others gathered to help the victim, McBride got out of the car. The 300-pound man then attacked a woman in a bear hug. Fearing for the woman's life, Kai struck McBride with a hatchet several times in the back of his head. The man staggered away but eventually survived. Kai's video recollection of the events went viral, and the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker became a celebrity. A few months later, however, he'd be arrested for murder. While in New York City, Kai was picked up by a lawyer named Joseph Galfi, who offered him a place to stay for the night. On the second day of staying at his home, Kai beat the 73-year-old man to death. He alleged that Galfi had drugged and sexually abused him. Kai claimed to have woken up with the man on top of him and that he fought back in self-defense before fleeing his home. The police concluded that the relations between the two men had been consensual and the murder premeditated. A jury would subsequently find Kai guilty, and he was sentenced to 57 years in prison. Thanks for watching. Which famous person, alive or dead, would you like to drive cross-country with, and why? Let us know in the comments section below.